All right, we're live. That was a bit of an abrupt way to doing things. Get the hell off me, you stupid piece of hair. This show's already starting off with a fucking blast. I'm your host, as always, Chet Porto. And joining me is my glorious co-host, Marcus Green. Marcus, how you doing?
I'm good.
And joining us as a specialty guest, if you will, host of the Ohio Guys podcast, Alex Swisher. Swish Daddy.
That's me.
Yep.
Well, what is up? How you doing?
Uh, Personally, I'm doing great. Professionally, the reason why I'm here kind of makes things difficult for me to say I'm doing great.
Yeah, it's not a great story to be covering tonight.
No,
That's
it
for
is
sure.
not.
So let me just balance out this audio real fast. Okay, there we go. So here's how today's show is going. Basically, Swisher will be joining us for the YouTube portion of this spectacular, and we're talking not just Davey Meltzer, Davey boy. We're talking Ryan Satin. We're talking sexual assault. And we're talking Michael Elgin and why this is not a story that should be ignored. It's a very sticky wicket.
Hmm.
There's a lot of conversation going on. There's a lot of accusations. There's very little sources or facts. There's just a lot of hearsay. But I feel there's enough in regards to Elgin from what we were able to dig up on our own that makes the lack of journalistic integrity too big to ignore. So let's just kind of frame it, and then I'll let Alex go into the bit by bit details on how we came to this conversation, and we'll go from there. Essentially, there's been accusations levied against Michael Elgin. There's been accusations levied against Sean Orleans, who's an independent pro wrestler that worked with Michael Elgin. And essentially, it tantamounted to sexual harassment from Elgin, and maybe even sexual assault and attempted rape by Sean Orleans, which would be technically described as sexual assault in a court of law. So there's allegations of these two things existing. We're not telling you that these are the allegations we're hearing. We will have a independent individual that we will source who is making the accusations. Dave Meltzer and Ryan Satin, who are considered to be two of the bigger names, along with Bixospin, Mixlplick, what's his name?
Bixenspan, David Bixenspan.
David Spickenspan.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Some of the bigger names in our industry in terms of covering news. We're nobodies. We are commentators at best, douchebags most of the time. We don't take many stories seriously. We don't take many incidents seriously. We laugh at most of the things we're given because it's a wacky business. For this story, we are going to try to be as professional as possible. We've sourced this. We've been talking about this for a few weeks. We've been following it. We have a decent understanding, in my opinion, or else we wouldn't be talking about it. And we are going to attempt to show you why not just Dave Meltzer and Ryan Satin failed, but the wrestling industry as a whole has failed. Not just because these women are alleging things, but because there's a lot of allegations out there against a lot of people that aren't coming to light because people are afraid. Because the wrestling industry as a whole is doing all they can to keep these individuals down. Now, I don't know if these accusations are true or not. We're not here to debate the merits on the truthfulness. But we have more than enough evidence on Elgin from his own words to show you there is a pattern of behavior here, and to ignore it is to ignore reality. And that's not something I'm down with. So,
Yep.
Swish, why don't you kick us off and tell us how this whole thing came to be in terms of this discussion?
Okay, so this goes all the way back to the beginning of December. On December 6th, it was widely reported by pretty much everybody, Fightful, Pro Wrestling Sheet, everybody reported that Michael Elgin had quit Twitter and lost the number of bookings following a number of revelations on social media when this woman on Twitter, her Twitter handle is Moses Malone, and I believe her actual name is Mo, revealed on her Twitter account that she went to Michael Elgin and talked to him about some sexual assault allegations between herself and Sean Orleans, who is a student of Michael Elgin's school and also worked for his company, Glory Pro. During those, it was also revealed that Elgin had some bad things to say about Jeff Cobb, and that was kind of where the story kind of fluttered off for a while, because everybody focused on the Cobb situation and not so much the sexual assault part of it. So it kind of didn't hold any water until a couple weeks later, when more and more of these screenshots were released of text messages and DMs and back and forth conversations between Mo and Elgin, stating that they had a relationship. They've had a relationship, an ongoing relationship, for a long time. That Elgin and her were very close, and that Elgin was in denial over the relationship following the publishing of these DMs and bringing it to the public eye. And again, it really didn't catch a lot of people's eyes. Nobody's talked about it. Satin, Meltzer, nobody. Meltzer did eventually state, and it took somebody asking about it on Twitter. He kind of brushed off the situation on the report. They talked about it on live, and again, they kind of brushed over it. But somebody asked him on Twitter, and he responded stating that he had seen that a lot of the text messages and conversations were heavily doctored to fit her narrative, to paint Elgin in a bad light. So that was the end of it again for a couple of weeks, until the beginning of the new year. And around January, somebody had asked Meltzer where his sources came from. She had asked Meltzer directly, how do you have the information that these are doctored and these are fake? And he linked to a Tumblr account called hellofindthetruth.tumblr.com, which stated a bunch of full screenshots and full conversations between herself and Elgin, and between DMs talking to other people who in this person's I guess you would call research and investigation, and the person behind this Tumblr's name is Roger Kane.
Well, that's the name we think is behind it. That's the name attached to it, but we don't know if that's his real name.
That's the name attached to it. We're not sure if that's really who it is. Had DM'd other independent wrestlers asking questions about her behavior and her sexual promiscuity and all of that stuff. But they state no sources. So Meltzer's in some hot water because he is trusting an unverified Tumblr and unsourced information, and where he is getting his information from. And then after that happened, Elgin flat out came out with an apology, stating that he apologized for the comments made about Jeff Cobb, and that he also admitted to inappropriate interactions with Mo, considering he is a married man and he has a family. He never directly states that he did anything along the lines of adultery, but he did state that his interactions with her, at least verbally and maybe even physically, were inappropriate considering his position in life. And again, that really didn't get covered. Satin came out, and his big headline for it was, Michael Elgin says comments about Jeff Cobb were unacceptable, and kind of brushed off he said he also released a portion of the conversation where a woman accused one of his students of sexual assault, and then that was kind of it. He really only talks about the Cobb situation. And then after, I believe that was on the 9th, and then she had a interview with pwponderings.com with Jerome Cusson, where she states that where is it at here? Basically, she states that anything that these people are saying, the fact that they're not covering it, the fact that she said Ryan Satin posted about Elgin's apology to Cobb with a quick link at the bottom to show the rest of Elgin's statement. Meltzer has covered the story multiple times with an astounding amount of errors, inaccurate accusations against me without having contacted me at all. And this was on the 11th. So up to this point, it's really hasn't been covered because of the delicate situation at hand, because the accusations being thrown around here, and I don't want to say thrown around like they're being thrown, just said without care,
right,
are very, like, these are huge accusations. These are 3 people's lives at stake here, so that's basically where we're at right now, without getting too much into the nitty gritty.
So, to be specific, what exactly are the allegations levied against Elgin? We know that Elgin was in a relationship with her, but she has accused him of abusive behavior. Am I correct?
Yes. So basically, she said that Elgin was abusive, like basically what a domestic abuse would be, where he would yell at her and tell her that no one else is going to treat her good, and that he is going to basically ruin her reputation outside of, with every other independent wrestler in St. Louis, and she's never going to be able to get along with anybody else. She's going to be outcasted from the wrestling world, and that he's the only one that cares about her. And a lot of mental abuse, a lot of mental, like, mind games trying to get her to do what he wants her to do is what she is claiming.
Now, the David Marzipan, whatever his name is, that whole
Yes.
situation came about because he had came to her, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Well, no. He states that she initially DM'd him,
Okay.
and it was not a story about. He says, first things first, when Mo initially DM'd me, this was not a story about Michael Elgin, wrestler I talk to sometimes. His name came up as a local indie locker room leader type who didn't believe her and thus was siding with Sean Orleans. She didn't relay any abuse allegations against Elgin or the stuff from the text she released later. Basically, it looks like she initially DM'd him regarding the Orleans situation and not outing Elgin as an abusive or like the abusive type or somebody who had abused her in the past.
So let's get very clear here. David Bixapan was going to run a story about the Orleans thing. He goes on to say that he was going to meet up with Elgin because he was named as a source of information in this investigation. He
Yep.
talked with him in New York face to face for what he claims to be a few minutes.
Yes.
He then talks about how he pitched the story to his editor. His editor shot it down. There wasn't enough there. So the story died, but he didn't tell the woman whose name is Moses Malone. I don't believe that's her real name, which is fine by me.
Yeah.
They address that. He drops the story. He tells her that somebody else will be contacting her about another version of the story, but that story falls apart. So essentially, no one writes the story. But here's the thing: David Bixapan is an independent freelance writer. He's an author. He's an independent journalist, just like me.
Yep.
I know for a fact that I can post anything I want if I want to. Now, there are some outlets I write for other people, but I also still have my own outlets. So if I feel there's a story that needs to be, decreed upon, spoken about, shown to the world, I have outlets to make that happen. I am not relying on one editor. So this whole argument that he met with his editor and the editor shot it down, I don't believe that, because he's an independent writer. I don't believe that at all. The story where he meets with Elgin and Elgin wasn't able to corroborate anything to make the story go any further, I don't believe that at all. Because Elgin does have some tight bonds in the wrestling community. We've seen that thanks to Ryan Satin, who has a very good relationship with Big Mike, because I know that because he called Mike Elgin Big Mike. I don't comment on people that I'm writing stories about in nickname form because that's not professional. Yeah. Then again, accusations on him not being professional is astounding. We know that Meltzer he's literally getting information from Tumblr blogs. Dave, I knew Impact Wrestling was going to be sold in November of 2016. Meltzer got information on a possible pending crime through Tumblr, written by a guy who just created his Twitter account in December of the past year.
Yes.
Who's tweeting about how he has all this information and it's all going to come to light, but he hasn't revealed any of the information.
Yep.
Now, I want to be very clear. Ryan Satin, Dave Meltzer, and Twitter guy, what's his name?
Oh, are you Bixen's fan or?
No, the other one.
Roger Kane?
We've asked all three of those men for comments. Yep. All three opted not to answer our request, so that means they declined to comment.
Yeah.
So here's where it gets even more tumultuous. If you were to say that these allegations were levied against Sting, or trying to think of somebody who has a sterling reputation, The Undertaker, or Bob Backlund, we would be very cautious with it. I doubt we'd be covering it because it seems like such a stark change from who we've known, who we've seen, how they've interacted and behaved throughout 30, 40 years in the spotlight to today. Like that seems like a bit of a sudden jerk from behavior. But with Elgin, I feel more apt to speak on this because Elgin himself has admitted to sexual assault, possibly even worse crimes.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea that he was abusive to Moses Malone is not something to me that I think is far-fetched at all. Because he's documented. We have the video. We will be uploading the video with this YouTube video so you can see it. It's going to be at the end of the video. It's about 10 minutes long. He tells a story to Kevin Owens, who's laughing the entire time, and Cheeseburger's there giggling it up as well. So all three of them, you can slam them all in the same kind of, box if you want. Michael Elgin tells a story about how when he was with, I think it was who, BWE, BWS, something like that.
Something like that.
Let me just clarify the organization. There's nifty little outlets you can use to clarify things like this, because they take detailed records. Go figure.
Yeah.
Never would have thought, but here we are. Let's see. BSE. It's BSE. So when he was working with BSE, they were at an event. And, some of the top guys were like him, Monty Brown, Eric Young. So this is probably 2005, 2006, 2007. So they're making the rounds. They go to this little tiny town. They meet up with this dude who had a wife, and eventually the dude gets kicked out, and the wife brings her and her cousin back to Elgin's room. Elgin frames the story where it was just him, the wife, and the female cousin were going to his room. No one else was there at first. And they start engaging in amorous activities. That's all fine and good. No problem with that. But then he tells how his roommate, I forget his name, a Tarantula something, Tarantula Gomez or something like that, walks in and he tells the guy, hey, take one of the girls. Which one do you want? At no point did he ask any of the girls if they wanted to go with this guy. In fact, there's even issues later on in the story that he alludes to that states that they were not okay with this. At least the one wasn't. So he takes the wife, and this tarantula guy takes the cousin, and they start performing amorous activities with them. They're screwing, to be blunt about it. Eventually, the cousin goes into the well. Actually, hang on. There's a point where people walk into the room and start recording it without their permission. So now you have illegal recording of a sexual act.
Mm-hmm.
We're at 2 felonies now. How much higher can we go? We then have Elgin telling jokingly, not jokingly, he tells that he tried to do this. He tried to get Monty Brown to tack in and take the wife from him. Didn't ask the wife. He tried to drag Monty Brown into the action. Now, Monty was involved in a very non-illegal way, but it was still kind of scummy. He was there laughing, watching the whole thing. I don't think he was allowed to be. I don't think he was supposed to be. But that's more of a moral issue, not a legal issue. So Monty declines, because Monty isn't a complete scumbag like Michael Elgin. He sees the cousin go, and basically hands the wife off to the other wrestler. He goes into the restroom to talk to the cousin, and the cousin says, "We did not come here for this guy. We came here for you." And then he tries to basically say, "Hey, well, I'm here now." And to set the whole story up, the whole bet at the start of this whole thing was a bet. And I forgot who dared him, but somebody dared him. I'll give you $100 if you're able to urinate on a woman while you guys are having sex. He takes the deal, and when he's cornered, she's on the ground next to the toilet with Elgin blocking the door, and he's sticking himself in her face, basically telling her what he wants to do, and she's saying no and no and no and no and no and no, and he's telling her he's going to do it enough times she finally relents. Then he starts doing it, starts urinating, and she freaks out. He starts laughing, finishes, walks out, and gets his money. I kind of at least 4 different felonies there. So if you're going to sit here and tell me that these allegations are impossible, that they can't be true, that Elgin's not a bad guy, Elgin's a terrible human being and needs to be called out on it. Elgin assaulted 2 different women.
Yeah.
And he bragged about it on camera. We have the whole video. We're not monetizing any of these videos, folks. So everything you're watching is us doing this because we feel it needs to be out there. We're not making any money off of it. We're claiming fair use on the interview because we're sourcing it in this part of the podcast. So they can't sit here and fucking copyright strike us because we're using it to further prove that Elgin told a horrific story of how he dismissed people's own what's the word I'm looking for? He disrespected their opinions. They disrespected their desires. He refused to listen when they said no.
Yeah.
So this idea that Elgin's not a bad guy, that's out the window. He's a bad guy. So for someone like Ryan Satin, and Dave Meltzer to basically sit on their hands and not address this controversy is bullshit. If you don't want to touch the Sean Orleans thing, that's understandable because that's a one-side situation. Both sides have a different story. I'm not saying she's lying. I'm not saying he's lying. I'm saying there's no evidence one way or another to corroborate her stance, which is one of the reasons why she's not going to the police. Because it's going to be a long, drawn-out process, and there's probably going to be no resolution to it.
Well, I mean, when you think about it, out of every, these are statistics from rain.org, out of every 1,000 rapes, 994 perpetrators walk away scot-free.
Mm-hmm.
The stats are against her. 6 rapists out of 1,000 will get incarcerated, and that's insane to think of. And she stated in her interview with PW Ponderings that she didn't go to the police because she worked as a crisis intervention specialist at a domestic violence shelter / rape crisis center. She has been involved in a fight against domestic and sexual violence her entire life. She said, and I quote, I'm very well versed in the statistic probability of a case like mine being brought to charges, let alone a conviction. And the statistics of sexual violence crimes reported to the police from the years 2005 to 2010, the reason victims chose not to report it, 13% of women believe that or sexual violence crimes victims believed the police would not do anything to help, and 2% believed that the police could not do anything to help. So 15% of what I believe it's the 690 cases that go unreported, 104 of those 690 victims believe that the police either wouldn't or could not do anything to help them, which is a crazy statistic when you think about it that way.
And there are people who are going to sit here and debate the statistic. That's fine. It's your prerogative to debate and question things. That's fine. But whether you believe that stat or not, the truth is that when you have a crime that's based on he said, she said, or even he said, or she said, there's usually not going to be a conviction because it's considered hearsay and speculation. So whether that's the stat you want to hang your hat on or not, people, is irrelevant. The fact is that she had honest-to-God rights, or at least a believability that if she did bring this to trial, it would just make her life harder, considering she's trying to break into the wrestling business, and it's been a struggle. As anyone who's breaking into the business will tell you. Not to such a degree that she's had. I don't want to correlate that every random nobody who's breaking into the business has to deal with that same kind of nonsense. It's not. That's not always the case.
Yeah.
But there's been huge accusations against Elgin. And we've heard stories of Elgin's behavior. Not to this degree, not to the degree of which he told a story of, but to enough of a degree that makes you very curious as to what else is out there.
Yeah.
We know Elgin isn't exactly a stand-up citizen here.
The thing that gets me about this, that really where it gets weird, is knowing that Meltzer sourced an unverified Tumblr, who we believe has connections to the Twitter of this Roger Kane fellow and is run by this Roger Kane fellow, whose Twitter is @arcade_time for truth, who basically, the Twitters and the Tumblrs are almost virtually identical, listing the same screenshots and the same collages, the same pictures. He links to the Tumblr specifically. The Twitter wasn't set up until after the allegations came out back in December. Their first tweet was on December 21st. The story was broke on December 6th of last year, which makes this even weirder. On the Tumblr itself, there is an email chain between Roger Kane and Michael Elgin. Roger Kane contacts Elgin initially, stating that he is a student. Well, he doesn't state that he's a law student, but we are to believe he is a law student
Because he's also a paralegal.
Because he states that he is a paralegal, and that he is looking to find out the details of Elgin's side of the story so that he can refer Elgin to a firm who would want to take his case and help him get out of this. I'm trying to find exactly what he said, but I believe he says something along the lines of libel with malice, I believe, is what the charges he is stating.
Those would be civil suit charges, just to be clear, not criminal charges. Because libel is not a criminal case. It's a civil case. So what he's trying to do is build up a civil litigation lawsuit against Mo through whoever. We don't know who this individual's sources are because he's either protecting them or making them up.
Yeah, so he told Michael, thank you, and this is a quote from Roger Kane. Michael, thank you for letting me know a little more about the situation. From all the text, tweets, and private communications you've sent, legally, you have a case for defamation. This is clear libel slander with malice. But these cases can be costly, so I will try and then it gets cut off. Something about an hourly rate for you from a firm that deals with these legal issues. So Roger Kane, being a paralegal and a student of law, is not taking both sides of the story into the situation here when trying to address this. He looked for Elgin's side specifically, and he contacted Elgin initially, which makes me believe that he knew of Elgin enough to the extent to know the allegations surrounding him. First off, he knew professional wrestling well enough to know who Michael Elgin is, because most normal casual fans of professional wrestling know WWE and know what happens kind of with the bigger stars on the outside of the WWE, but I feel like you really have to be kind of well versed in professional wrestling knowledge to know who Elgin is, especially to the extent to follow a news story citing allegations against him of abuse and defending someone who may be guilty for sexual assault. So it makes everything that's being provided from this Tumblr and this Twitter that Dave Meltzer has gotten his hands on, and citing that as one of his sources for the information he's been using on his newsletter and on his podcast and all that, that it's biased, or at least shown to be so far biased, because there's nothing in there stating. Literally, one of their last posts was them saying that I believe it was something along the lines of they have proof.
Right. He said roundabout that he has proof that not only is she making up the things about Elgin, but that she's lying about the Orlean stuff as well. That's essentially what he said.
Yes, it says, with mounting evidence and proof, we have some very interesting developments, including evidence that shows every statement made in Mo's interview is indeed false. Biggest, we have proof that she lied about the sexual assault that started all this. Time's up. And that's a quote from the Tumblr directly.
Now, I do want to bring up something that he's been saying on his little Twitter account because I feel it's relevant.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I had to drink something. He's been saying over and over and over again on this Twitter account, he's focusing on one thing she said that she's apparently since deleted. And it was a post where she basically said, something around about 9 months I couldn't be around anyone. I couldn't touch anyone, couldn't hug anyone, yada, yada, yada. The piece of evidence that he seems to be alluding to is an allegation. I shouldn't even say an allegation, but a rumor that he's apparently heard that states that she's apparently slept with somebody in between that 9-month period where she couldn't touch anyone after she was assaulted. And he's really, really harping on that one point to show that she's lying.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I want to go into a little personal stuff here. Not me, but two women that I used to date. I won't name names. I won't even give you any hints as to who they are. They were several years apart, and they were both victims of rape. Both of them had mood swings that were irregular and unexpected. They both had reactions to things that one would kind of see as peculiar or odd. When you know the situation and the circumstances, you understand it and becomes a lot easier to understand. But if you don't know everything about these two women, you would think that they were basically bipolar. But they weren't. They were dealing with PTSD. When you engage in a situation where you're so physically, disrupted, where you're assaulted and you're forced to deal with something on a day-to-day basis that you don't really know how to cope with, your behavior becomes erratic.
Yeah.
So if this paralegal, who apparently is very bad at his job, is going to sit here and say because she omitted while she didn't need to bring it up or not is irrelevant. She does not need to bring up her sexual history. In fact, most courts would strike down bringing up a victim's sexual history in the court of law when it comes to allegations of sexual assault or rape. So this is even immaterial if you're trying to build a libel suit. Whether she slept with somebody or not within that 9-month span she claimed she couldn't touch anyone is irrelevant because it does not speak to the violence she was a victim of. And you can also very easily explain away where some people do use sex as a coping mechanism. So just because she's intimate with another person does not mean she was not a victim. And this person keeps trying to harp on that singular issue as if it destroys her entire case. So when you see these things, and you see that these are the people that Dave Meltzer and Ryan Satin are being influenced by, mostly that part is about Dave Meltzer. When you see what Dave Meltzer is being influenced by, it's really hard not to be very taken aback and very annoyed and very angry at the situation. The Ryan Satin part of this follows directly under him being boys with Elgin. I cannot prove this. I cannot say for sure that he is burying the story for the sake of Elgin. But he is a fan of Elgin because he uses an Elgin nickname, Big Mike. It's one thing if you're talking about The Undertaker and you don't want to talk about, and you just say hyphen Taker because that's a shorthand way of saying his name. Big Mike is longer to write out than Elgin. And when you're talking about an individual in a story, once you establish the name, you use the last name in reference to this individual for the rest of the story. That's how you're taught to tell the story, or not tell the story, but taught to tell the news in journalism class. So if he was going to source it and write it properly, it would be Mike Elgin, Mr. Elgin, or Elgin.
Yeah.
So by going with Big Mike, he's showing that he has familiar ties to the individual at hand, which speaks to his credibility on the story, because if he's going to bury the story and focus on the drama, which is what it was, and she even goes on to say, though, Miss Malone even goes on to say that the reason she brought the Jeffrey Cobb stuff was to get people to notice what she's saying, because she knew that people would care more about Jeffrey Cobb being made fun of than someone alleging abuse.
Yeah, and it's shameful that that's where we're at. That the only two of the biggest wrestling journalists out there today are refusing to fully report on this story, and put Elgin's name out there as someone who doesn't deserve to get bookings or anything like that is shameful. And I can already start picturing Meltzer's excuses for this, and I can already start picturing Satin's excuses for this, and I know something Meltzer's going to say. Meltzer is going to say something along the lines of, well, getting rid of Elgin hurts the business as a whole, and I just do my job to help the business prosper. And it's a cop-out excuse, because we're losing Elgin from professional wrestling doesn't hurt the business. The business is going to continue to grow with or without him. We don't need him, and we don't need people like him in professional wrestling. And it's disgusting to see the length that people would go to keep his name off a radar as someone who is abusive and someone who is potentially, and this is all potentially, allegedly tried to keep Orleans out of trouble because he was tight with Elgin and he is one of Elgin's students. It's a gross misuse of power, which is crazy to me, because when you say gross misuse of power, you only think that this happens on the crazy high levels of professional wrestling up in the WWE or in the corporate aspect of it, but it's not. Dave Meltzer and Ryan Satin have a responsibility to tell the truth, and if they're not putting their best foot forward to report the story in the way that it needs to be reported, then they're not doing their jobs at all.
We know that at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to change most of your opinion. We know at the end of the day, we're not going to be able to even directly affect how this is talked about or viewed. But here's the thing. If you're one person, we hope that you can make enough of a difference on your own to stand up for what you believe is right. If you believe Ryan Satin and Dave Meltzer have done nothing wrong, we don't agree with you, but that's your prerogative. If you feel like they have, even if it's just underreporting the story, then tweet at them, email them, make them know that you're there and that you are watching, because this is a story that we should not be covering. They should be covering it. We are not the reporters that they are. We are not the journalists that they are in terms of covering news stories. They're the ones who should be picking up this story. They're the ones who should be deep diving into the story. Swisher and I spent at least 2 hours last night and maybe another 9 hours over the course of the last 3 weeks getting information on the story. Mm-hmm. I know it's not a long time over that course of period of weeks, but that's more time we put in the story than they have. And for us to do this and not them is a sign that they are no longer worthy of your trust. Because if they're willing to pick and choose what you know or what they tell you, if they don't believe every news story that they get told is worthwhile, not credible, because there's a difference between credible and worthwhile. If they don't feel like the story is worthwhile or will hurt them or their buddies, then why are you supporting them? Ask yourselves that. If you have a problem with the way they're handling it, tweet at them, email them, let them know. To the individuals, and there was also a secondary story that kind of parlayed off of this with a woman by the name of Pollyanna. Her and Malone have been kind of going back and forth on Twitter in a bit of a moral kind of, I got your back, you got my back kind of thing. And Pollyanna's her story has been swept up in this as well, and hers involved two individuals from the UK recently being suspended or let go. One of them had already actually been suspended or let go prior to this. So, there's a lot of stories going around that people are not covering. A woman with the WWN Live, she was a ring announcer there. Apparently, during her time in either WWN Live or FIP, she was a victim of gross sexual misconduct, I think, is what she alleged. And no one's picking up these stories. There are a few. PW Ponderings deserves all the credit in the world because they're one of the ones who are actually trying to find the information out. But we shouldn't be talking about mid-level news sites finally doing their jobs. We should be talking about the major names who are always breaking signings and suspensions and firings and gossip. We should be holding them accountable. And that's what I hope this story will do, is help you guys realize why they need to be held accountable. You cannot have someone who's a serial abuser like Michael Elgin come in and dictate to his buddies, Bixpin, whatever his name is. I'm sure Satin, same way, maybe Meltzer. You can't allow these guys to have that kind of protection in the media. In a time where the news is so bad, misses so many stories and doesn't vet their sources enough, we need to do a better job telling you guys the news, and you need to start holding their feet to the fire. We consider ourselves an entertainment kind of commentary. We sometimes tell you what we hear and what we're told, but we don't actually deal with some of the heavier stuff. That's something I wish that we can change, and we might in the future. I just hope that you guys understand that this isn't some kind of takedown piece. This is just the news. We are just telling you the truth, which is something apparently Meltzer and Satin refuse to do.
Yeah. The thing is I hate that I have to come on this show to be able to...
Well, we hate having you, but don't...
Yeah, I mean, I'm over here taking up Marcus's precious airtime. I hate that I have to be the one to kind of do this because I was thinking about this earlier today. I have going on 7 years of experience in the journalism field. I have 0 degrees in journalism. I studied journalism for 1.5 years while also studying psychology at Capital University. I did not graduate with a degree. I'm a college dropout. I'll fully admit that, but I have worked on and off in writing. I've worked for the Columbus Dispatch as an intern and doing temp work and writing brief public opinion pieces and stuff like that. I have experience in this field, but I'm not going to say grossly unqualified to be reporting on this, but I am definitely not the one who should be the guy. I'm definitely not the guy who should be stepping up to the plate to do this. And the fact that it falls on I'm not saying it falls on my shoulders, but the fact that I'm one of the people willing to step up and report what I'm finding instead of just sitting behind my Twitter and just, making fun of fans who are asking legitimate questions at Dave Meltzer. And he kind of plays a bully on Twitter when you look at it. And it makes no surprise because I hate to admit it, but the wrestling community is very toxic, and professional wrestling fans are very toxic and sometimes can be horrible people. And we really need to start taking steps in 2018 to prevent that and change the way wrestling is perceived and wrestling fans are perceived. And we need to start making this a better place for people to come and enjoy the sport and enjoy what they see on TV and what they see at independent promotions and have an enjoyable experience live when they're there and not have to worry about being sexually assaulted or being called a liar or journalists calling them, lying, manipulative whores and stuff like that. It's not my job to try and save professional wrestling, but I'm not going to step outside and start protesting Hollywood because I don't work in Hollywood, but I work in wrestling. And I would like to make my community a bit of a better place. And if this is the way I have to do it, then this is the way I'm going to go about it.
Swisher's unqualified the way someone who covers, say, the Golden Globes is unqualified tackling a major cover-up in the United States Senate.
Yeah.
It's not that he's unqualified to be a reporter. It's just this is not our field of expertise. We are not deep dive sleuths. We're not expose journalists.
Yeah.
We're commentators. We tell you what we see and what we hear, and we tell you what we think. So for us to be doing this shows you that there's a lack of culpability and a lack of just basic decency at the top of our industry. People should be held responsible, and there's a lack of responsibility right now on these guys. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to step up out of the ball pit. Because basically, the three of us belong in a ball pit at Chuck E. Cheese. That is where we do our best reporting. This ball is yellow. No, that ball is definitely red, Chad. No, it's definitely yellow, Swish. That's what we do. So for us to actually get out of the ball pit and to actually try to tell you guys what's going on in your own field, in your own interests, I think speaks to the severity of this issue, because we don't take time to talk about these issues often.
Yeah.
And when we do, your ear should peak up, and you should very well be listening, because it means something for us to talk about this stuff, because it's not our normal repartee. I treat Seth Rollins being with a woman accused of Nazism very lightheartedly. I call him a quote-unquote Nazi fucker. I'm not going to deep dive into her life and prove that she's a Nazi. I don't need to. She's been accused. She's admitted she owns paraphernalia. That's all I need to make fun of her. But to tell a real story, like what we're trying to do right now, it shouldn't come down to us. And yet it feels like it has. PW Pondering has done a good job, but I feel like they're not covering the whole scope of it. That's why we're stepping up. It's not that PW Pondering has failed. I just don't think they saw the whole picture. And to be fair, I wouldn't have covered the whole story we covered today if it wasn't for the fact that I've already seen the Elgin interview when it first came out 3 or 4 years ago. That's how I remembered it, was because I knew it existed. Maybe PW Pondering doesn't know. I don't know. Yeah. I'm not going to sit here and make allegations. I know that David Meltzer cites a Tumblr blog on his own. What was it? The Red forum? Was that what it was? The Red Wrestling forum he was on when he cited it?
I believe it was his own forum.
On his own forum, he cites a Tumblr blog, and he refuses to comment on why. Ryan Satin protects his buddy in a news post and refuses to comment why. So we're going to do it. We're going to ask why. Maybe they'll get an answer to ours. To the individuals, the women who have come forward recently, Pollyanna and Moses Malone, incredibly brave. You can argue the merits on whether they're telling the truth or not all day long until you're blue in the face. I have found enough information on Michael Elgin to believe her. I don't know anything about Sean Orleans, but if you're friends with Michael Elgin, I'm going to assume you're a trash person too. As for Pollyanna, the two individuals in England are essentially kind of, I don't want to say they're guilty, but a lot of people are kind of nodding their heads like, yeah, we've been hearing things all along. I don't know if that's true, but I have no reason to doubt it, because she's essentially like ended her career over there, at least for the time being, because of these allegations against them. So I have no reason to doubt these women.
Yeah.
And while I'm always a fan of research, investigate, sometimes when you get reached at the end of the investigation, you need to come to a conclusion. I believe that Moses Malone is telling the truth. I have no reason not to. We're not doing this story, though, for her. She's told her own story. She's gotten this information out there. She doesn't need our help. I'm hoping that with this story, with what we've talked about today, I'm hoping that you guys at home will realize that we need to hold those at the top to a higher standard. And that's what I'm hoping for out of all this. Who knows if it'll happen. So finally, before we let you go, Swish, Marcus, you have probably been sitting there going, fuck. With all this being said, do you have anything you want to add? Because to be fair, you've been, I don't want to say kept out of the loop, but Swisher and I have been covering this on the Ohio Guys podcast for the last few weeks. We just brought you in the last 24, 38 hours into what's going on in the story. So obviously you sat back because you're still new to this situation. But is there anything you want to comment on?
I mean, obviously, I kind of sat back. Obviously, you gentlemen, like you said, have been covering it for weeks now, and you both eloquently stated your points in a great way. For me, just listening to everything, obviously, it's a lot to go through. And really sad when it comes right down to it. But for me, two things here are clear. One, there's been a concerted effort to either keep Elgin in a good light and kind of brush this woman's this lady's story and her concerns and things she's brought up to the side, which is, obvious here. And it becomes even more alarming because when you look at somebody like Dave Meltzer, who was supposed to be this extremely high reputable source in this business, for him to be, touted as much as he is, it's obvious how much he wanted to brush this to the side when he doesn't even care to have a concrete source to cite when refuting, what's been presented. So, and Satin's kind of just, kind of going along to get along, what have you. But he's also somebody that's supposed to be reputable, and he's also, complicit in this whole thing. But yeah, I mean, the other thing is, like I said, two things. One, they're brushing this to the side, and two, Elgin's a unique form of scum.
Yeah.
And, it sucks in every sense of the word, but it is guys like this, and we talked about something else on ComicCorp I think that was last week, talking about, the elderly, and I think we were talking about the Stan Lee story and how, they get taken advantage of and stuff like that, and things like this that happen all the time, and more often than actually reported, as Swish obviously laid out the stats. And the reason why a lot of that stuff happens, why those stats are the way they are, is because it's things like this when women come out and they present their case and provide evidence, get brushed to the side. Women don't want to have to go through that. And you can't really blame them. When you've been through some traumatic ass sexual assault, abuse, or what have you, bringing this stuff to light makes them basically relive it. And them having to come relive it all over again just to not come to any resolution where they get any form of justice, you can't really blame them.
Mm-hmm.
You would like to obviously see it more, but you can't blame them. So for me, like I said, you two gentlemen put it, you stated your points eloquently, and like you said, we shouldn't have to be covering this, but because we care, because we are decent human beings that give a damn about this business and seeing good people win at the end of the day, and scums lose, we try to do what we can. But like I said, this whole thing is just sad. It sucks. Elgin is a douche, like I said, for several reasons, both all the crap that he's pulled with these women and the stuff he said about Cobb. So, hopefully there's some form of justice served. And as far as Satin and Meltzer go, I think, Meltzer has kind of made a game of kind of brushing people aside, specifically on Twitter. So, hopefully some justice at least comes for Elgin, as, like I said, Satin and Meltzer can kind of just scathe on by, unfortunately.
And with all that being said, I think we've reached the end of this conversation. Swisher, you've been invaluable to this conversation. I don't want to be that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. We'll update anyone come Friday on the Ohio Guys podcast on twitch.tv/Real NerdCorp. Which one is it?
Real NerdCorp.
Twitch.tv/Real NerdCorp. Swisher is the host of the show on every Friday at 9, generally speaking. Sometimes we have to rearrange the days sometimes. But if we do that, you can find us on Twitter at NerdCorp, NERDCORP. So we're going to send you off in the evening. This will also be the end of the YouTube version of the podcast. The rest of the video will be the Michael Elgin interview from, what was it, High Spots streaming service?
HighSpotsWrestlingNetwork.com.
So we're going to air that after this. Again, we're claiming for use. If High Spots tries to pull it down, we will not let them, because this goes into showing the character that Michael Elgin has and is responsible for. So with that being said, we're going to close off for the night. Marcus and I will be on for another few minutes or so, probably longer than a few minutes, which you'll be able to hear via downloading the podcast in the link below. So if you want to hear the other hour of the podcast or so, listen down below, click and save and all that. Swisher, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. Again, I'm sorry that you brought me on as a guest under these situations. Hopefully next time I'll be back for some more lighthearted stuff. But thank you for letting me put all this information that I've gathered out there to the world to kind of make their own judgments about.
Not a problem. So you're free to go off into the night as you will. As of this point, if you don't want to listen to the rest of the podcast, find us on realnerdcorp.com, RealNerdCorp. All the links are right there on the website, so you can check it out. And with that being said, Marcus, you can take us home for the first part of the podcast.
Lots of stories. I will leave it up to him to tell or not tell.
Is it story time then? Like the horny facts?
I don't know. What's a horny fact? Maybe we don't go into a full story here because
Well, not
Quite frankly, it's appalling.
we brought up the story, so they have to be covered at some point now. But the horny facts are just little things about sexual acts with females. And when I'm single, I like to retweet them, so any girls who follow me might see that. Maybe they'll think of something that they want to do with me, and then it works out.
All right. Well, now you talked about a story, so pick one of your filthy stories, tell it, and then we'll move on to something else.
Okay.
You decide.
BSC was running a show
fuck, why'd you have to pick that one?
in Timmins, Ontario.
I already know it.
So we had a long drive up to Timmins. We started drinking in the van, and there was a bet laid down that nobody could piss on a girl in the heat of passion. And it was $100 laid down that nobody could. So we did the show, and to just lay out the whole platform of the show, it was like the first time that Timmins had seen wrestling since like 1987.
May I just mention, just for the record, that I first heard this as I was half asleep in the back seat of a car that was being driven by Mike as he was telling it to other people. And I was in and out for this story because I was half asleep. But every single detail of it that I caught just blew my fucking mind and appalled me more and more as the story went on. Carry on.
Okay. So we go into town, and as I said, it's a small town. They hadn't seen wrestling for years. We come in the main bus station of the city. There's a huge billboard of the show. It's a big deal. I think they had brought in like Monty Brown and Showtime Eric Young.
What do you mean you
Maybe
think?
I forget.
He's an
who it was.
integral part of the story.
No, Monty Brown and Showtime were, but what I'm saying is I think there might have been other people on the show. Like, it was a big show for BSC. It drew like 3,500 people the first time in the town. It was a really good draw. So after the show, we went out to the bar. Now, we get to the bar a little bit early because my match was on, like, first couple matches. We get to the bar a little bit early, and this guy's like, oh, you guys were awesome. Can you sign my T-shirt, sign our posters? Brings his wife over, has us sign his wife's tits. So as the night's going on, we're getting drunker, and I'm dancing with this girl, and she turns around and starts making out with me. Now, I pull back to see the signatures all over this girl's tits, so instantly I know that it's the guy's wife. I say, where's your husband? She replies with, he got kicked out for fighting about an hour ago. So instantly I think to myself, well, why don't you come back to the hotel and party? She said, I have my cousin and my friend with me. So why don't you bring them with us? So her cousin, and her friend are all walking back to the hotel. It's me and a couple other guys. I have a roommate, but he's nowhere to be found right now. So the friend is the mother hen. If you're not familiar with a mother hen, it's usually the bigger girl of the group who's not getting any attention, and she's trying to cock block everybody else in the group. So she's now yelling at me saying, you know, she's fucking married, right? Blah, 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 blah. My friend now sees this, runs interference. I go through the back of the hotel, get into the room. As soon as we get into the room, it now breaks down to myself, the guy's wife, and her cousin having a threesome. This threesome is interrupted by my roommate, which is Tarantula Gomez.
Oh, I did not catch that detail the first time.
I say, which one would you like? He picks the cousin. He takes the cousin onto the other bed. We're both going at it now. And I hear somebody kind of walk in. And then I hear, hey guys, the party's in this room. So we're doing our things on the bed.
Because,
and I hear,
let me clarify, you filthy animals hadn't closed the door.
my roommate hadn't closed the door. So we're now in there, and I hear a gathering of people laughing behind me. So what do? I grab the girl, and I now face her towards the wall, which is now filled with Monty Brown, Showtime Eric Young, my head trainer Rob Fuego, and his wife.
When you say that you grab the girl and you move her, I can only picture it as when you do the fucking deadlift German to someone.
Quite, yes, very similar. Very similar.
Except you don't drop backwards. Just...
So now, I'm fucking her in front of the group of people, and they start laughing. Somebody's videotaping. Another wrestler might be doing commentary on this
Cheeseburger's loving
recording. And Monty Brown is shaking the entire fucking room because he's such a big man and he's laughing so hard. So I think, why not make the hot tag to Monty Brown?
Tell me.
And I start fucking. I give him the high five, trying to get him in.
Tell me he smelled the rope first.
And he's still laughing, going, "No, I got a girlfriend. I can't do it." He's dying of laughter. I'm fucking, get in here, Monty. Get in here. He's dying. Everybody's dying. They start
Monty
leaving.
Brown laughs uncontrollably at people having sex.
So
that should
now,
be a newspaper
now
headline.
it's me. It's broke down a little bit. It's myself. It's Connor and the other girl. Sorry, Tarantula Gomez and the other girl. And Fellatio, Otis Idol, and Cody Deaner.
Fellatio's a wrestler, not the act of fellatio.
He was a wrestler.
Okay.
Phil.
Yeah, I know.
Fellatio.
I know it, but the way you say it now, mixed in with all your
Yes,
fucking.
I'm sorry, but so they're now.
It just sound like somebody's blowing.
They're
someone.
still recording it. So I finish having sex with the girl, and I see that Connor's on the bed by himself. So where's the other girl? I don't know. She went to the bathroom. I now pick up the girl that I just had sex with and throw her over to Tarantula Gomez. Walk to the
black
bathroom.
hole slam, surely.
Yes. I walk over to the bathroom to where this girl is sitting by the toilet. And I go, "Are you okay?" She goes, "Yes."
What do you mean sitting by the toilet?
Literally, like, if this is a toilet, she's fucking sitting on the ground, kind of just like
in
this.
front of it or between the wall or the bathtub and the toilet?
Kind of like in front of it, facing the door. So her back's like, almost if the toilet was a backrest.
She could be leaning on it.
Yeah. I say, "Is everything okay?" She goes, "Everything's okay. We came here to be with you. Didn't know what was happening, blah, 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 blah." It's like, well, we can still be together. So she starts performing fellatio on me. Now, I see the light of the camera behind me. So I proceed to ask this girl if I can piss on her. And at first, she's saying no. But I'm being very persuasive and saying, "Oh, it's going to be so good. Like, you just keep going and I'll piss all over you, blah, blah, blah." Finally, to where she gives me the okay to piss on her.
The Kevin Steen show is not the classy affair I expected it to be.
So, as she's saying yes, I begin to piss on her. Her deflection of the piss is this. But that ain't stopping no stream of piss from hitting you in the face. So
Especially not from a Canadian crazy horse.
So as now she realizes that I wasn't fucking around when I asked her if I could pee on her, and she said yes, I was actually going to pee on her. So she's going like this, and all I hear is, "No, no, stop pissing on me." They're laughing, I'm laughing. We have to go back to get my money now. So we go in.
Of the bet.
Yes. The bet that was laid down at the beginning. Follow this story.
Were you naked when you went to get your money?
No, I put on underwear. I was naked the rest of the time, though.
Oh, fuck.
Go back to the room. Give me my $100. I peed on a girl. She said okay. It was in the heat of passion. He doesn't believe me. We try to fucking rig up the video camera for him to watch. For some reason, the video camera will not play it at that second. I'm telling you. No, you guys are going to fucking split the money, blah, blah, blah. No. 10 minutes later, Otis and Connor run into the room laughing. What's going on? What's going on? Otis is like, "I'm drinking my beer. I'm telling the girl what to do to Tarantula Gomez." And all I hear from the bathroom is, Cindy, Elgin fucking pissed on me." So we wait a little bit. We get paid. We're going back to the room. These girls are just leaving now. And all they could say was, "See you guys in September." Now, after pissing on the cousin, I look at the wife. Connor, Tarantula Gomez, left a hickey this fucking big on her neck. She's going home to her husband, and they still want to see us in September. Like, that's fucked up.
Yes, it is fucked up.